All right, it is Friday, March 6th, and it's time for another edition of the Tip-Off Show powered by Wager Talk TV. We thank you for joining us. You've made it through the end of the week, and we've got Ralph Michaels hanging out with us to break down today's college basketball card. You can follow him on Twitter at CalSportsLV. You can follow me on Twitter, Jared Smith, at Jared Lee Smith. Don't forget, before we get started, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Wager Talk TV. Visit our website, wagertalk.com and sportsmemo.com, and of course that coupon scrolling on the bottom of the screen right there, JS39. That gets you 3 days all access to any handicapper on our site, and that is $50 off the regular price. Good deal if you want to get an early look at some of these conference tournament games as we head into a very exciting weekend. So Ralph, I'll give the floor to you. What did you see last night that intrigued you? It was an interesting night. We had some ranked games on the card, but really the conference tournaments are starting to really percolate now as we're getting to now the second week in March.
Well, I'm going to talk about a team that I lost to. I gave out Nevada minus the 10, and, they were up by 10 at the half. And I tweeted out this morning, since 2010 in college basketball, there have been 11,474 dogs of 10.5 or more. Only 868 or 7.6 outright as a 10.5 point dog. Only 16 times in 10 years has a team won back-to-back games as a 10.5 point dog like Wyoming did. So, I mean, when you do something 16 times out of something that's occurred almost 12,000 times, congrats to the Wyoming Cowboys.
Yeah, that was a crazy game. I think the Mountain West Conference tournament is going to be really intriguing. We'll see what Utah State has tonight, in that game against Wyoming, considering Wyoming coming off of that big upset. We'll see what San Diego State has against Boise. I thought Boise State was a good pick yesterday. We saw a reverse line movement in that game going against UNLV as UNLV continues to struggle mightily on their home floor. Not a lot of movers today. So I want to bring up a kind of a live betting point. This is something we talked about before the show. Ralph and I wanted to get into this because we saw a couple of heavily favored teams yesterday struggling in the first half, i.e. San Diego State, i.e. Liberty in the Atlantic Sun. So we're starting to see some of these teams that are big favorites get off to maybe a little bit of a slower start, but both of those teams won, and both of those teams covered the live lines if you bet them at halftime, Ralph.
Well, yeah, it's a great point to bring up, Jared, because when, there's a lot of times you don't like betting a game because the line might be too high. And San Diego State was an example, laying 17.5 yesterday in the Mountain West Conference. But when they were down by 4 at halftime, the halftime line was 10.5, meaning you only had to win by 6.5 or more. It's something I jumped on. I went to the game with Drew Martin. It's something he jumped on. And there's often you could find value. Now, granted, we were at the game, so it's so much easier to see. The fan support was 90-10 San Diego State. Those fans are great fans. They know how to cheer defense. They know how to cheer hustle. They're not cheering on offense. They're cheering when the team deserves to get cheered. But it was also a situation where you look at Air Force, and they shot over 60% in the first half. You knew there was no way in the second half they could do it. Moving to the Mountain West, we're not really going to talk about this game, but I do want to correct you to a degree, Jared. On the UNLV game, the Boise State was not that good of a win because Elijah Mintru-Long, their point guard, missed the game. That's the first game he's missed. He's played. He was their leading scorer the previous 6 games. He tweaked his ankle late against San Jose in the regular season final, and he did not play at all yesterday. So you're missing your point guard. It doesn't matter how well or how poorly you're playing. The line doesn't get adjusted because you're not sure if he was going to play or not. So, Boise, when you look at Boise State, you look at R.J. Williams, and it's men against boys when he's in there. When you see 23 grabbing rebounds and scoring, he looks like an NBA player compared to everyone else. But, I don't have Boise as high as they should be after knocking UNLV because of the injury situation.
Yeah, and I don't even know if that officially counts as a road win for Boise. I think it should. but it's a neutral court win officially. But you know, the UNLV was playing on their home floor, and you mentioned that you were at the game. It was mostly Rebels fans. Interesting in the Big South. We've got an interesting game today in the Big South. I think Winthrop could be the real deal in this conference, Ralph. And they've got a good game today against Gardner-Webb. And Gardner-Webb's been a great team historically. This is a team in Gardner-Webb that's been to the tournament of late. I want to say they've even won a tournament game recently. And they faced Virginia last year in the NCAA tournament, the eventual national champs. They only lost by 15 in that game. Interesting game today. It's a 5.5-point number between Gardner-Webb and Winthrop in the Big South Conference. I believe Winthrop won this matchup. Yeah, Winthrop they split. Wow, this is an intriguing matchup. So Winthrop beat Gardner-Webb in triple overtime earlier this season, and then they came back, Gardner-Webb did, and won at home against Winthrop about a month ago. So it's a season series that split at one. It's on a neutral court today between these two teams. I kind of like getting the 5.5 with the Bulldogs here.
Yeah, we might have a beer bet on that, Jared, because
okay.
I look at Winthrop and I look at their efficiency. There's only 3 teams in the Big South that had a winning record in conference play: Winthrop, Bradford, and Gardner-Webb. But I look at Winthrop and their offensive efficiency is number 1 in their conference. Their defensive efficiency is number 1 in the conference. And yes, you lost to Radford and Gardner-Webb in back-to-back games, but I think that just makes them stronger moving forward.
Sure.
You've got 4 upperclassmen playing. And then probably one of your best players, which makes Winthrop even stronger, is, you're bringing a freshman off, DJ Burns, who hasn't been starting lately, but he did start earlier in the year. So you and I officially have a beer bet on the Gardner-Webb and Winthrop game.
That's the Big South semifinals. That's going to be played later today. Winthrop coming off a big win over South Carolina Upstate. They dropped 106 points in that game, 54 and 52 in the two halves. Gardner-Webb coming off a 10-point win over UNC Asheville. Interesting stuff in the Big South. I do think one of those teams can contend in the NCAA tournament. We've already seen Gardner-Webb have a pretty decent result against Virginia last year, who was the eventual national champs in that 116 game. Some other interesting games today. I think we've got to talk about this Richmond-Duquesne game a little bit. The A-10 has been very fascinating this year. It's Dayton and everybody else. Rhode Island's had a couple of cracks to kind of, show some chinks in the armor to the Flyers team, but they've gotten blown out both times against Dayton. Richmond's actually played Dayton tough this year. They only lost by 8 points in Dayton. So I think I think the Spiders are an intriguing matchup here against Duquesne. It's a road game, and I believe Richmond is still favored, but we've seen this line kind of hover back and forth. I see Duquesne favored by points somewhere. I see Richmond favored by points somewhere. So it's basically a toss-up game, Ralph, in what could be the two next best teams in the Atlantic 10.
Yeah, Keith Dambrot deserves a lot of credit. He did a great job at Akron, taking this team from 16-16 his first year to 19-13 last year, and now 21 wins. And, while I could say, how excited can you be for a home finale? I don't know how much Duquesne has left in the tank.
Sure.
You go to St. Bonaventure, you win in overtime. You come home against George Mason, you eke out a game by 3. Then you go to VCU. VCU is sitting a couple starters, but you still win that game in overtime. So you're off 3 straight games decided by 4 points or less, 2 of them in overtime. And, you only have one senior. You have one senior starter in the center Steele. So, it's not a huge senior day. But, before, talking to a good friend, Joe Raineri, when he says, you write down the Richmond Tigers
he likes
today,
Richmond today.
I'm not going to argue with him when Joe has that strong of a point.
I was going to go with this Mo Val early game for my play of the day, and I still will, but I'll give the alternate play of the day in honor of Joe, and it's going to be the Richmond Spiders. I like, it's funny, the A-10 is always one of those leagues that seems to be right on the cusp of having a great team. And, we saw it with St. Joe's a while back with the undefeated team, and there's been some really good Temple teams over the years that have come out of the A-10 before they moved to the American Conference. I think the A-10 is a much better basketball league than they get credit for, and Dayton is really pushing the envelope of that league this year. But there's some other good teams in the A-10, and they're going to get in the NCAA tournament. They're probably going to get 3 or 4 teams in the tournament. And I think one of them could make a run besides Dayton. Like, obviously, Dayton has the chops to make a run, but I certainly think Duquesne and Richmond are capable, and Richmond's got a really tough test tonight. It'll be a very fun game in the Steel City between Richmond and Pittsburgh. Not a whole lot going on tonight in terms of ranked games, Ralph, but I hope you have some fun TNA with some of these undercard games that we're going to see across the board here on Friday night.
Oh, absolutely. Let me pull it up, and, we're looking at I don't often mention straight up numbers, because how often are they relevant? But when the line isn't too far, it's something I look at. Well, let's remember the Citadel had lost 18 straight, but I will say this. Before Air Force won the opening night in the Mountain West, they had lost 12 straight against the spread. So there's some times when a bad team gets that restart in the tournament where all of a sudden, it's 1-1. Well, Ball State, 1-16 over under their last 17 road games, Jared. 1-16. Ball State's playing great defense, and it's something that I looked at and I got to the window with tonight. A system I want to mention. This system tonight applies on both Western Michigan and on Hampton against Radford, and it's simply this. From game number 21 on, so late in the season, if you won as a dog your last game by over 15 points, and now you're on the road. So you had a big win. You were a dog, you won it, and now you're on the road again. That has been a 60% play with over 300 plays and over 10 years of data. So we're not talking about, 60% isn't going to get you rich, but it's going to make you a nice profit on the year. It's one of those systems that I always look at. So a team on the road off a 15-point win as a dog later in the year, game 20 on. Couple more team trends. Princeton's now covered 11 of 12 in the Ivy League. Miami of Ohio has gone under 10 straight games. Another team with a very inept offense and a decent defense. And Wake Forest, Danny Manning's crew really pressing the tempo. Wake Forest 15-3-2 over under their last 20 games.
Interesting. Good stuff, Ralph. Not again. There's only one top 25 team playing tonight. Friday night's always a light night on the college basketball card, so no surprise there. But that top 25 team is playing a very important game. It's San Diego State, top 5 team, not just top 25. And they're taking on this Boise State team that, call it an upset last night. They were about a 1 or 2 point underdog against UNLV, so not really much of an upset. And according to Ralph, because UNLV was without one of their best guards, it really wasn't an upset at all. And the Boise State Broncos probably should have been favored in that game. They are not favored tonight against San Diego State. As you would expect, the San Diego State team is getting a ton of love. 9-point favorites right now. I'm seeing it pretty much 9 across the entire marketplace. I do see one rogue 9.5 at Circa. But this does seem to be a pretty consensus San Diego State victory tonight. But, Ralph, my question is, can the Broncos cover this big number in the Mountain West semis?
Yeah, can they? Yes. Being at the game, watching both of these teams play, San Diego State has the presence to cover Boise's top player. R.J. Williams went off yesterday. I think he had like 23 points and like 13 or 14 rebounds. Could have had more than that. But, San Diego State does have Mitchell. He can come out and play defense on him, and I think he does a good enough job. I am not on the game. I think San Diego State clearly is in the spot to play better. Again, Boise off a win that's a bit misleading. But I'm just going to simply say this. San Diego State trailed at the half against UNLV at home, end up losing the game. San Diego State was at home against Colorado State, trailed at half, ended up coming back and winning. Colorado State was at Nevada, trailed at the half. San Diego State was against Air Force, trailed at the half. In each of your last 4 games, you've trailed at the half. I'm not going to be a superstar here. I'm just going to say, if I'm playing anything in this game, I'm going to fade San Diego State in the first half, because after 4 straight games, are you automatically going to say, oh, well, we can't start slow again? Well, I'll tell you what. After they lost to UNLV, they said we can't start slow against Colorado State. They did. After Colorado State, they said we can't start slow against Nevada, and they did. And then they started slow against Air Force. So, current form just has me saying this. If I'm going to play anything on the game, I'm going to play Boise first half and then perhaps look for a live betting situation to bet the Aztecs when they get down in the first half.
Yeah, I think the great strategy for the tournaments, if you have the live betting availability, is to utilize that. I've had multiple occasions where I've seen teams get way too over-adjusted. Liberty was a great example of that last night. Liberty, I want to say they were either 6 or 7 point favorites. They were fairly high favorites in their game last night, and they got off to a slow start. I think it was against Stetson, and they just couldn't quite get it moving early, but the line really over-adjusted in the first half. And I talk about this with NHL games all the time, where the live lines on an early goal, if you're betting a favorite and the underdog scores the first goal in the first period, that favorite flips to a dog very fast, and you get $1, $2 of value on your favorite. When in reality, the first goal of the game, just like the first 10 minutes of a college basketball game, I liken it to like an NFL team driving down and giving up a field goal on the opening drive. You don't feel like the game's over, but obviously the other team scored first, and you'd be surprised how many times the favorite falls behind early and comes back and not only wins the game but covers the original number, and you're getting a lot of value on that line. So look for those favorites. San Diego State could be a great example tonight. The one matchup that scares me in this game for San Diego State, Ralph, is that Wetzel kid dominated Air Force yesterday because they were just so much bigger than Air Force was. Boise State's got some size in the middle. They're a top 40 height team, according to the KenPom rating. So I don't think Wetzel's going to give them as much problems on the inside. Malachi Flynn's going to have to set the tempo in this game for the Aztecs. If he does, I think San Diego State can set their number and win this game comfortably. But if Flynn struggles on the second game of a back-to-back now, we'll see. Shooting performances sometimes can be very random second day of a back-to-back. So, take that into account. But I loved what I saw from Malachi Flynn last night, Ralph. He looks like he's a Naismith finalist.
Well, the tough thing about Flynn was this. He played 34 minutes, but he sat like the last 4 minutes of the first half because he got 2 quick fouls.
Yeah.
So, he only ended up with 3. He ended up with 16 points. And, that's that. He has scored double digits in every game since San Jose on December 8th when they had it. But Malachi Flynn was not the integral part of the team yesterday that they needed to. So, it was Fagan. It was Fagan, the guard, who really led the way yesterday. And he got up there and, while he only had 11 points, it's funny when you're watching a game live how you have a different perspective of who really scored the baskets when they needed them. You can get a lot of hoops, and if you get hoops, it's like anything else. If you're a home run hitter in baseball and you hit 60% of your home runs when you're up 5, they don't matter as much. Playing a backup, playing the bottom of a bullpen because you have such a big lead, it's not the same as hitting 60% of your home runs against starters in games that are within a run of each other. So, like I said, nothing against Flynn, but, he wasn't the spark plug yesterday he needed to be. But again, you talked about the size. This is Air Force. These are guys that are going to be fighter pilots there. That's why they don't have size.
Exactly.
Talk about back-to-back games, and I was mentioning this to Drew. He asked me, well, did I bet, we talked about that system yesterday, and we said, in that system, those teams that pull the upset in the first round, are they a negative in the second? But Air Force is such a different team. These kids are so regimented. Them playing the night before and then playing the next day like the Missouri Valley, those kids are used to doing that. That's why they're different. They're elite athletes that are doing calisthenics at 4:30 in the morning because they're doing their homework at 6:30 in the morning, before they're practicing for basketball. So, again, you have to remember the situations are always unique, and Air Force athletes are obviously unique where an 11-hour difference from one game to the next isn't the same as perhaps a best bet you may be giving off that's going to be tipping off here shortly.
Yeah, people might miss the best bet, maybe for better or for worse. People that are watching this live will get it. And maybe they can jump in live. Who knows? Maybe Northern Iowa gets off to a slow start, and we'll get to that game in a little bit because I think the mobile is fascinating. So not a lot of ranked games on the card tonight, Ralph, but there is some interesting stuff this weekend. A couple ones that stuck out to me. I'm very fascinated to see how the Big Ten wraps up this weekend. I know Ohio State plays Michigan State on Sunday. That's going to be a huge game. I think the Big East is still up for grabs as well. Any overarching trends that you're looking to kind of tie bows on this weekend as we really wrap up the regular season?
It's unique. It's just taking each game into situation. So no, there's no one situation I can say I can do this. Look for the teams that don't have anything to play for against a team that does have something to play for. The best game to me on the board, no question, is going to be Baylor and West Virginia.
Oh, yeah.
We saw West Virginia now 2-6 their last 8 games, including home loss to Oklahoma. So, can they get the ship righted after beating Iowa State? That's the one game that I have circled that I am most intrigued to play. Because we know Baylor is a legit 1 seed. If they get knocked out, that might put the question in the 2. I could see if Dayton runs the table and Baylor loses to West Virginia and then gets knocked out, I could see Baylor dropping down a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, that could happen. So here's some of the interesting games this weekend. Villanova at Georgetown. Villanova still has an outside shot to win the Big East. Seton Hall and Creighton on Saturday at 2:30. That's going to be a really fun game. Louisville at Virginia is an intriguing game for me. I think Virginia's stock obviously is on the rise based on what we've seen in their last 2 weeks. I just don't know how they match up against some of these elite offenses. Louisville's kind of in that category, but we'll see there. Of course, UNC Duke on Saturday as well. That's the Saturday card. And then Ralph mentioned that Baylor at West Virginia game. That is also a Saturday game. And then Sunday, I think, is the Big Ten takes center stage. Michigan at Maryland, Ohio State at Michigan State, Iowa at Illinois. All ranked teams. Illinois will probably fall out of the rankings this week because they did lose to Ohio State. But that was a good game against Ohio State the other night. Actually, it was last night. We didn't touch on that game at all, Ralph. Did you see anything from Illinois in that game that made you think they can be Big Ten contenders? I think they're just on the cusp, but I still think they're a player or two short.
Yeah, I was driving back from the Mountain West games, and I saw what Illinois was up 5 or 6. I blink an eye, and then Ohio State's up 4, and then that was it. So. We talked about Ohio State being a team that's top 20 Ken Palm offense and defense. So, while they don't have the superstar, Wesson doesn't get put in the category of superstar. This is that same Chris Holtmann head coach that took Butler to those teams. And, there are certain coaches that know how to play and coach in crunch time, and he's one of them. Yeah,
great stuff. So we'll see the Big Ten wrap up this weekend, the Big East, and then those tournaments I think are going to be off the absolute hook next week. Right here across the street from us at the Garden, we'll be able to kind of see the Big East unfold, and then the Big Ten will hang out their tournament at Indianapolis. All right, best bets time. I was the only, unlike yesterday when I was the only loser of the three of us. Of course, Drew's best bet was San Diego State last night. You had UC Davis. Those were frustrating ones where San Diego State won and didn't cover, and UC Davis, rough game down the stretch. I hit my pick with Drake, so at least we have a winner on the board tonight. I'm going back to the mobile today. I'm fading Drake in this matchup, and it's because of what Ralph said last night, but also an interesting matchup quirk in this game. Drake doesn't defend the three well at all. They gave up 12 of them to Illinois State last night. That was the only reason why Illinois State stayed in that game. Drake dominated in the middle. Drake dominated shooting it in the paint, but they gave up a lot of threes. And guess who's a top 5 team shooting the three in college basketball this season? The Northern Iowa Panthers. I think UNI, even though the line's moving against me, I think UNI gets it done. Tough turnaround. Drake played last night. Early game today in the mobile. Give me Drake. I'm seeing 8.5 in the marketplace. I'm going to grab it. Give me the Panthers, UNI, minus 8.5. What do you got for me, Ralph?
Yeah, well, I agree. I actually got to the window with Northern Iowa as well. And just to put your numbers down there, the Panthers are number 2 in the country shooting 3-point. And Drake is number 341 out of the 353
That's not good.
Teams in defense. My best bet, as you mentioned yesterday, I tweeted this out. UC Davis at home against a poor Hawaii team traveling was up 62-49 with 4:31 left. Hawaii outscored him 18-3 down the stretch.
That's rough.
That
wants you to put it through a fist through a TV.
Yeah, I'm going to go a day game as well, and it's an ugly team that you're going to say, how can you lay points with VMI? But I guess Samford is even a worse team. You look at what they've done on the road their last couple games. VMI has been the superior foe, and I tweet out often. Double revenge doesn't mean anything. But when you've been a favorite in both games, like VMI has against Samford, and you're a favorite again in this game, it's been a very positive play. Game 871, VMI -3.
All right, good stuff. VMI and UNI are the best bets here on Friday. Again, thank you for watching the tip-off show powered by Wager Talk TV. Don't forget, follow us on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Wager Talk TV. And, of course, visit our websites, wagertalk.com, sportsmemo.com. And, of course, that coupon code JS39 gets you 3 days of all access to any handicapper on our site. One of those handicappers could be Ralph Michaels. Ralph, thanks again for joining us, bud. Enjoy the weekend. Good luck. We'll talk to you on Monday.
Thanks, bud. Appreciate it.